I travel a lot on different adventure motorcycles, and here is my review of the Aprilia Tuareg 660. First, let's think about what should be the best sized mid-adventure bike. 21-inch front wheel, a 200mm or longer suspensions, it should have around 700cc and make around 200 kilos. KTM 790 and Tenere got the gold for the latest years, so it remains to be seen how the Tuareg is better than these two. But there is one but. There are dual sports and hybrids such as KTM 690s at the bottom. And at the top you get the comfort and performance of heavyweights over 1000 cc's. The best adventure motorcycle should be a good off-roader while having the same level of comfort and handling as you get on big-sized tours. Otherwise, what's the point? People usually expect that a reviewer is telling them how good the motorcycle is off-road. I'll tell you soon, but in my opinion, that's not what really matters in the Tuareg review. Because it's obvious that it's the lightest motorcycle in class, equipped with decent wheels and long suspensions. Everything is decent, everything is good. There are no complaints about the ergonomics, and the engine has low revs torque. For all adventure bikes, the main challenge is pavement. I know there are a lot of folks who buy these motorcycles to ride only dirt, but I think that's dumb. A dual sport costs much less and is capable of carrying you for 100 kilometers to the trails too. While it's obvious you can do much more technical riding on it because it's 60 to 70 kilograms lighter, while a dirt bike would be 2 times lighter and you can ride it harder. Not just because of the weight, but also because it can be dropped from a rock and it's going to survive. As an example, the MX track nearest to me is not allowed to be ridden on a dual sport even if the bike is technically capable of doing it. The reason is when you start riding it harder and learning MX stuff, like doing jumps, you will make mistakes, and that's what the bike is not designed for. So the adventure bike is firstly and secondly a touring motorcycle, and everything else comes after. The main problem is most 21-inch adventure bikes get too soft suspensions. It's fine when riding broken pavements, but it's a nightmare when riding twisties. Twisties meaning mountains. Mountains are the best thing about traveling. So at the end of the day, you have a touring motorcycle, but there's no thrill in the mountains, especially when you know how to ride bikes that handle that. There is a common problem among Tenere, Africa Twin, 800, 850 GS, and so on. I used to think that people just prefer softer suspensions and others like stiffer ones. But here's what I got after asking people around. Guys who don't ride dirt or travel only on pavements, they like softer suspensions, and it's a joy when the suspension swallows speed bumps. And those who do off-roading, not to mention practicing harder, all of them prefer longer and stiffer suspensions, which give more control. It seems that the whole conspiracy about cushy suspensions is based on manufacturers being focused on the comfort of riding bad pavement of Africa and Asia when the suspension should swallow everything, and less experienced riders tend to like it more. And the fact that these suspensions are awful on paved roads and you don't feel any confidence is just a collateral loss. Mainly, the only brand who promoted stiffer adventure suspensions is KTM. But they are also far from perfect bikes if we're talking about 790 or 890. The R have 2 harsh ones, the S didn't get any adjustments on the fork before 2023. And even after it, KTM still pushed their version of ignoring a conventional levered suspension progression. It's a trade-off. And here we get the Tuareg with a perfectly tuned suspension. It's similar to the KTM's one, it's made for handling, not for comfort. If you put an inexperienced rider who doesn't move the body weight, never stands on, etc., his arms will get clogged and the seat will throw him out. And the suspension won't give you much comfort on bad pavement as well, it's just not made for it. From the other side though, unlike the KTM, the Tuareg has a wider suspension adjustment range, thanks to the fact that at least it's being levered, and it also can be adjusted to be friendlier. The biggest pro is how incredibly Tuareg handles twisties, remembering it's a touring motorcycle. And I'm not talking about any secret adjustments, just open the manual and find the setting for a single rider with luggage and do what it said. Enjoy the accurate handling that 95% of adventure motorcycles simply don't have. So you can imagine not every adventure bike with a 170mm suspension can give you the sharpness. But here you have a 240mm off-road bike, which is surprising. Of course, on hard braking, the Tuareg is diving. Of course, it doesn't handle like a sports touring bike, but the Aprilia grips hard mid-corner and when changing directions. You don't have to catch the bike or adjust directions mid-turns. It rides like a decent adventure motorcycle with short suspensions. It also has lightweight tubeless wheels, and it also makes turning better than on a Tenere. The Tuareg suspension is fully adjustable, both front and rear. Considering its fairly moderate price tag, it's a plus. For example, the 850 GS or a regular 890 Adventure before 2023 were more expensive, having not a single fork adjustment. Aprilia has also a dedicated rear shock preload adjuster knob that you can twist with your hand while sitting on the motorcycle. It's also not a problem to install adjustment knobs to the fork, so you're able to adjust preload with no tools. Here, both front and rear dampenings can be adjusted with a screwdriver. While to make the same adjustments on the KTM or Desert X, you'll have to spend a few minutes. The default settings are not suitable for comfy off-roading. You need to soften it, especially the fork. The adjustment range is enough to make it nice and elastic off-road, although it won't be squishy. There are decent suspensions among full-size 230-240 kilogram motorcycles, and my heart is taken by the 1290 SAS, but among mid-sized bikes, the Tuareg suspension is my number one. Plus, the Tuareg has the best geometry, as well as the Tenere. Tuareg, considering its long suspensions and huge wheels, is very stable and has decent grip on highways at 160-170 kilometers. You can ride it with no hands on it, while the other long-traveled adventure bikes start floating. The next pavement advantage of the Tuareg compared to the Tenere, or for example the Transalp, is having electronic aids. It won't dive in all levels of its traction control. Not because it doesn't make sense, it does when you ride a paved road in a rain on knobbies. But for me, the main thing is cruise control. Of course, it is a necessary feature for any touring motorcycle, but most of all, it is needed on lightweight adventure bikes. When you're exhausted after the trails, riding the highway home or wherever you are, the only thing that you want to do is just turn on cruise control and relax. And for me, the lack of cruise control on the Tenere is a huge con. It's not just a minor flaw. I also really like the way the ride mods are implemented. Usually I don't use mods much. I just put a motorcycle to sport mode, but not with the Tuareg. Here we have 4 mods, 2 of which can be adjusted. Actually, I used only the adjustable 2. Don't ask me why they couldn't make them all customizable like the Ducati did. You can change the throttle response here, as well as engine braking force, adjusting traction control and ABS, and even completely disable them. For example, I like a sharper throttle response and stronger engine braking when riding canyons. It allows me to use the brakes less. Also, when there is a lower speed limit when entering a city or a tunnel, you can decelerate with only an engine, not using the brakes. Unlike in the city where I like to have some more roll, you just see a red light far sheer, so you can just close the throttle and the motorcycle slowly rolls forward. Riding slippery off-road, I like a smoother throttle so I can easily adjust the power, or opposite when it's not slippery and there are big rocks because I need to lift the front. In both cases, the deceleration should be set to the mid setting. On the one hand, it should not throw you over the handlebar when you close the throttle while standing. On the other hand, at least it decelerates before turns and on descents. I turn off traction control completely if hill climbing, or I might leave a little on if the conditions are easy and I'm riding fast. I leave the rear ABS on riding rocks and turn it off in wet dirt. Front ABS can also be disabled if you want. It seems like minor things, but it allows the bike to match your riding style. And yes, since we have riding modes, the bike has electronic throttle. So it's easy to hold speeds and the grip is easy to twist. The levers are easy to push as well, unlike the Tenere where the clutch is a little too stiff. There is one annoying thing on the display. When the cruise control is enabled, there is a blinking green light close to the turn signal indicator. It distracts you, especially in the dark. It makes no logical sense. There are many cars with cruise control enabled by default, and somehow we can survive without it. On the Tuareg, as well as on the KTM, you can see navigation arrows on display, control your music with the handlebar controls, and have other useless whistles. As a sign of good manners in the class, you should get handguards, engine guards, shock and fork dirt covers, a high-mounted radiator that doesn't eat all the dirt from under the wheel, a foldable gear shifter, quick-release rubber on the foot pegs, removable passenger foot peg brackets, and so on. There is nothing to complain about here, so let's talk about the engine. The 790 or 890 are rejected immediately. I never liked this engine. Yes, it has more power, but the trade-off is its vibrations, jumpy performance, and complete lack of bottom-end grunt. It shines closer to 200 kilometers an hour, but who needs that on knobbies? To be honest, I have never seen a person who would prefer a KTM 790 engine over its competitors. A similar story is happening with the Ducati Desert X, which also doesn't have much low-end torque. Tenere is the opposite. Apart from the fact that, according to some research, CP2 is the most reliable engine, and even if Aprilia wanted, they probably cannot get the crown. I love the Yamaha engine so much for its smoothness, almost complete absence of buzz, and juicy low rev torque. To be honest, it's hard to imagine a better engine for adventure bikes to use considering its displacement. If we compare the Tenere and the Tuareg, we can find a difference. For example, the Tenere has stronger bottoms while the Tuareg is stronger on the mids. But we compare them with the other bikes, these two will feel identical. Tuareg is also good at low RPM as well as in the mids. You can easily control the torque, plus the engine modes make it even easier to make the Tuareg suit you better. Both the Tenere and the Tuareg have perfect engine performance in the class, and I have never felt the need for more power. It's just enough at any revs. It easily reaches 170 kilometers an hour, and I didn't want to ride them faster. There is potential in terms of power, but the bikes don't provide comfort and confidence. You feel the suspension is too tall. They are a 21-inch wheel, and it lacks wind protection. Compared to the Tenere, I can say that the Aprilia has minor buzz, and it's a standard buzz for the mid-sized engine. I don't like vibrator motorcycles, and this one wasn't too harsh. Yes, I feel some through the pegs, but at the end of the day, my hands and feet don't shake even after riding for hours on a highway. So it's not that bad. I can forgive even stronger buzziness for a hardcore adventure bike with knobbies. As expected, the Tuareg's fuel efficiency is perfect. The consumption was 4 liters per 100 kilometers or 60 miles to the gallon, while I rode mountains, and sometimes it did even better. I even saw 3.5 liters or 67 miles per gallon accordingly in 90 to 100 kilometer an hour moving traffic. And it gives you 4.3 to 4.7 liters per 100 kilometers or 50 to 55 miles per gallon on highway, depending on wind and other conditions. The only time I saw 5 liters per 100 kilometers or 47 miles a gallon was on the last day when I just experimented and rode snatching. The Tuareg's WMTC consumption is the lowest in the class, unless we counter the NC is in the class too. The Tuareg's consumption surprises you in some conditions, but if you just cruise on highways at regular speeds, the Euro 5 Tenere will have more or less the same range. But the difference is the tank size, and you feel it. The Tuareg goes around 400 kilometers on a tank in almost any conditions. The Tenere just cannot compete. Yes, there is a Tenere World Raid, but you need a stepladder to reach the seat. By the way, for the class, the range is more important than for crossovers. The normal riding for these motorcycles is not highway riding. You have enough gas stations there. It's about trails. They're good in every way, except for some reason, there are no gas stations. When you need more range, you should leave the trails and then ride to a station, then ride back to the trail, wasting 40 minutes. Despite the fuel efficiency, the Tuareg's engine doesn't like to stall like the fresh-made Euro 5 engines. For example, many modern European bikes are efficient, but they tend to stall at idle, and they didn't do it in the Euro 4 times. And I am not even mentioning the Chinese Euro 5 complaint bikes. They tend to stall because of any minor reason. The Tuareg is different. It doesn't stall and works smoothly at the whole RPM range. I gave it a test and it still kept going fine where I thought it was going to stall. Here's an example. I was too lazy to adjust the gear shift lever for my off-road boots, so there wasn't enough space for it. It's not the bike's fault. So when I put the boot on, I just tried to make fewer shifts. For example, I rode on some trails all on third gear. The Tuareg pulled hard and smooth even when you climb small hills. Very cool. What's uncool is that the shifter is too harsh. It might be because you feel it better even through off-road boots. Yes, it's easier to hit while riding a pavement, but what if you're jumping somewhere over rocks and you need to shift? Everything is shaking and you need to lift the left foot quickly so the foot peg spikes and stops biting it. And then you need to reach the shifter from the bottom. So I think the light shifts are even more important off-road, so each shift takes as little as time as possible so you can move your foot back. And it's even worse when you're needing to upshift riding in light sneakers. Quickshifter does not help. It's about the shift lever. While the Quickshifter is also far from being perfect, you can find a sweet spot in the RPM range and it's going to be alright, but it's not going to be if you're outside of it. Sometimes you need to shift it sooner than when you reach the high revs in a town and you feel it's too rough. On downshifts, it's always rough. I have not found the range when it's smoother. It's often just easier to use the clutch. But to have a Quickshifter is anyway better than not to have one. You understand it when you ride budget bikes. The sound on the Tuareg is superb, at least with the muffler I got. So I've never heard the stock sound. The one installed was loud and beefy while not annoying cruising highways, and you almost never hear it on freeways. It leaves you with a pleasant aftertaste. I don't remember anything that sounds better in this class, although I also had some with aftermarket mufflers. There is an option that Tuareg is hot on your legs. I think I also have one because I live in the south of Spain and I've ridden it in 3 different conditions while it was around 30 degrees Celsius. I did it in both touring gear and well-ventilated mesh off-road pants while I was crawling dirt roads and it was at least 30 degrees outside. I also rode it in shorts in town. I felt the engine heat only in shorts and it was just warm. I didn't have any serious complaints. I wouldn't have even noticed it if people didn't say it was too hot. Now let's talk ergonomics. One of the biggest drawbacks of the Tenere is it's very tall, while the World Raid version is just ridiculously tall. Moreover, the suspension travel is not something special, so it's not that much of a gap to install a lowering kit. Yes, you can lower the links, but it might hurt the geometry. The bike will be rideable, but in terms of handling and weight distribution, it's going to be a different bike. The Tenere's balance is well refined, and you're just going to be unrefining it. You can lower it with a flatter seat, but any of its competitors might offer you a 2cm lower seat, so the Tenere is still the tallest one. The Tuareg's initial advantage was to have a 2cm lower seat height than the stock Yamaha from the beginning, while maintaining the same ground clearance. And in reality, it was even better. The Aprilia has a narrower seat, so you don't have to spread your legs as much as around the Tenere. I assume they achieved a narrower frame, and it's even better as soon as it touches dirt. The Tuareg is too stiff for dirt, so you decrease the preload to achieve a better behavior. You can release the preload a bit on the Yamaha as well, but it turns into a creep. Secondly, the Tuareg has a longer suspensions, so it needed a bigger sag if we assume that the perfect dirt sag is a third of its travel. Provided you can adjust it with only your hands, no tools needed, it really works. I felt much more comfortable on the Tuareg off-road. I can easily reach the ground and still have my knees not straight, while on the Yamaha, I barely touch the ground. It doesn't matter unless sometimes you need more comfort feeling the ground with the foot or making a stop in a rut. And it's not that likely to accidentally drop the Tuareg. If you feel safer, you ride more confidently. That's why you're seeing me riding off-road, while I usually ride only my known trails fields. If I drop a rent bike, it might cost me around €1,000, but I just cannot drop the Tuareg. The height fits me perfectly, and the bike is just that light, so I can feel I can hold it in any situation. Seat height is an important factor, but I still think that the KTM 790-890S is the best choice for short-legged people. Nothing has changed here yet. For average and tall guys, the Tuareg is better than the Yamaha or the KTM. The ergonomics doesn't get any complaints, at least by 188 centimeters tall and me being 6'2" in America. It's good when you ride standing. The legs are perfectly positioned in the hollows and the pegs grip boots perfectly. Nothing sticks out or gets in the way. The tank shape is fine. The seat width is fine. Everything is okay when you move your weight back and forth. And let's not also forget that the Tuareg is definitely the lightest motorcycle in the class, especially mentioning the full-size touring tank. And most of the tank volume is located under the seat, moving down the center of mass of the motorcycle and making it narrower. Considering weight is the main off-road specs, you cannot get away from it. The handlebar height is perfect. The length and shape are perfect. You feel it's wider than on Yamaha or the KTM, but because it has rounded guards, the overall width is the same. The stock mirrors are very wide. You don't see your elbows. I'd like to see the internal corners bigger, but it's just a preference. Anyway, it makes sense to install hinged mirrors for this type of bike. There are no ergonomic issues while sitting. The knees are relaxed, the hands reach the bar not too low, and so on. The screen and the dash are far ahead. You always see the display no matter if you're sitting or standing. No need to lean down to read it. The display itself is bright. There is a long peak which protects it not so much from the sun glare as from rain and dust. While standing hovering over the handlebar, you don't just reach the windscreen with your nose, and it's out of your vision so you can read the dash too. In short, the Ergo is not worse than on the Tenere and is so much better than on the KTM for tall guys. The seat is softer and more comfortable than on the Yamaha and the KTM, but it's still not a long-haul seat. Its filler material is fine. You don't feel the bottom through when you touch the seat. For me, the issue for it is its shape. I might complain if we were to discuss a 240 kilogram motorcycle, but it's a decent seat for a mid-sized bike. It's better than on the Tenere, and you can live with it. I rode it in my racing shorts on the second day with the bike, and the shape didn't cause any issues. But I'm not saying the Ergo is perfect. The first con is the handlebar switches are pushed closer to you, so it's unlikely to turn the blinker on while the clutch lever is pulled. The second issue is the windshields. Just take a look at the visor and you'll understand everything. I don't have any idea why this windscreen was set on this bike. The wind blows straight into your eyes as soon as you reach 30 kilometers an hour, even if you're moving your head down. At 80 kilometers an hour, I cannot ride even with my goggles, only with a fully closed visor. And unlike a conventional rounded one, this windshield works like a vacuum cleaner. Every piece that happens to fly in front, if it's not pushed on the sideways, gets sucked right into your eyes. I got 2 Bs in my goggles while performing the test at medium speeds. So it doesn't protect you from flies, and also it shakes the helmet. Sometimes you just can't see straight on the freeway because of the turbulence. It was a nightmare for my MX helmet at speeds of 100 kilometers an hour. Much better when you don't have a windshield at all. The only downside to that is it's harder to breathe. Other than that, it would be better. My neck and shoulders were sore from fighting the wind. Other than that, the motorcycle was comfy for its class. But because of the wind, it was noisy too. Not because I'm a tall guy. To avoid the noise, I had to put my head down for 30 centimeters, so I would buy a decent windscreen as the first mod for any height, or at least a deflector. So what I am telling you is I can easily find an ADV which is more comfortable than the Tuareg, but there's just one but. The bike will be 20 to 30 kilograms heavier than the Aprilia. And at the same time, the Tuareg's comfort, it's much closer to 1000cc ADVs than to a KTM 690, a DR 650, and so on. It's like a perfect middle ground. Also, I'd like to mention 2 other issues, so no one can say that I am biased. I believe Yamaha's headlights are better. Aprilia's low beams are fine, but the high beams are useless. It can be fixed with extra parts, but still. And I don't like the brakes. There are 2 Brembos here, and the discs are bigger than the ones on the Tenere, but I just don't like them. I noticed that on many Italian bikes, they have weird feedback when it bites very gently, but then it suddenly goes hard. It's how they want you to feel the brakes, but I just don't like it. People say that it can be fixed with different pads, but anyway, with a 790 or 890, not mentioning the Tiger 900, you don't even think about it. I'm talking about these minor things so you understand that sometimes you should customize things to suit you better. Other times you'll just have to get used to them. But you cannot find a better off-road capable lightweight adventure motorcycle. You know I'm not falling in love with every second bike here. By the way, I don't like the Tuareg's look at all. I am not an Aprilian fanboy for sure. I have to admit the performance. The whole secret of the Tuareg is that Aprilia's didn't reinvent the wheel. They learned from the Tenere, who was the market leader for 3 years, and built the same machine but fixed some of the bike's problems, while Yamaha's just laid on the beach enjoying Tenere's sales. It has been more than a year since the beginning of sales, and there are no mass reliability issue reports to be seen to worry about too much, as you might be looking at the KTM 790. However, the Tuareg is not taken from a void. The engine ran on road bikes before. It has its recalls and fixes. It's not a pig in a poke. It's a pretty rare case where it's so obviously the best motorcycle for me in the middle class, so I wouldn't think twice if I was on the market looking for a brand new bike. Maybe in 10 years I'd prefer Yamaha's reliability. Not because the Tuareg is not reliable, but just because the Tenere is the reliability king with a wide service network. But these problems should not worry the first or the second owner.